How does that jibe with the fact that amulets and these items can be used, hopefully, to change the physical world?
Well, here you have two levels. First, the Kabbalists themselves warn about the dangers of these things. It's not something that's taken very trivially. Second of all, in the very passage in Deuteronomy, the Bible goes on to say, I will raise a prophet to you. In other words, there are forbidden means of trying to ascertain, say, knowledge of the future or knowledge of the hidden, and there are permitted means. In Talmudic literature already, the distinction is made much more clearly. And it seems really, it depends on where a person is coming from. A person is trying to manipulate the force of creation through the dark side, through what the Kabbalists would call the Sitra Achra, the other side, the dark forces. This is absolutely forbidden. And it's forbidden not so much because the person is manipulating nature, but because he is actually trying to manipulate through that which goes against the divine.
So the idea is that it's only thing that's acceptable as far as the Kabbalah is concerned in terms of using magical powers would be for the positive or for the good.
Right, and then only in the most circumscribed areas. In fact, there are many Kabbalistic sources that seem to indicate a person actually needs a divine directive before one can use these forces.
Would you consider yourself a mystical rabbi?
Actually not. I consider myself an ordinary Orthodox rabbi, or ordinary rabbi. I really don't like to even throw labels on.
Do you utilize any of these magical aspects in your study of the Kabbalah?
Magical, definitely not. Meditative, yes.
Tell me about that. What kinds of experiences have you had? How would a service in an ordinary 20th century synagogue that was a meditative service, how would it differ from an ordinary service?
Well, actually, that brings back to another thing. People don't realize to what degree the ordinary synagogue service is based on Kabbalah, is based on Jewish mysticism. It has many roots in Jewish mysticism. In fact, many prayers are specifically taken from the mystical tradition. The difference I think the major difference would be that a mystical service would be much slower.
Slower.
And the main difference would be internal. I mean, let me give you a good example.
Please.
Let's say in the Amidah, which is the standard Jewish prayer said 3 times a day.
Right.
Incidentally, the very fact that it's said 3 times a day gives it almost a mantra-like quality, this prayer. But you see, the person praying would say, the great, mighty, and awesome God. So a person could think of this intellectually, what these things mean. But the mystic, or the person who's really delved into the prayer, when he says great, he literally becomes aware in every possible way, every fiber of his being, of what God's greatness means, what God's strength means, or the awesomeness of God. So actually, it's not an intellectual, but a direct experience as to what the words of the prayers mean.
So you're suggesting that when you say it's slower, that the meaning, the significance of each word would be meditated upon before moving to the next in the prayer. So the full awesomeness of the meaning would somehow be transmitted to the individual.
Precisely. And actually it's interesting, throughout Jewish literature, not only Kabbalistic literature, even legalistic literature or Talmudical literature, one finds this thread of the idea of kavanah, of concentration on the words, of making every word count, of making every word change you as a person.
Rabbi, how popular is it becoming? How are more people getting interested, more Jewish people getting interested in mysticism, and is it more popular in one age group as opposed to another?
Well, in general, I would say yes. That in general, mysticism has become a sort of part and parcel of our pop culture today. So a lot of young people are becoming interested in Jewish mysticism. In fact, I meet many young people who have had an interest in Eastern religions, and when they discover that Judaism has a parallel to offer, they just eat it up.
But what about some of the, shall we call them, more conservative groups, the older group perhaps? What do they think about this? Is it something they consider legitimate, even though we know it had its roots in ancient tradition?
It depends whom, but in general, Orthodox Judaism sees the Kabbalah and mysticism as being an important segment of the tradition. There are all kind of taboos against studying it for somebody who hasn't the proper background or the proper age, but people are a little bit afraid of it, but people recognize it as being legitimate.
You see it as a growing thing, however.
I see it as something growing in importance throughout the entire spectrum of Judaism.
I want to thank you very much, Rabbi, for coming and talking to us about a very interesting aspect of ancient tradition and contemporary Judaism. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.